Hey friends, Elizabeth here, and I am back again with a video that has become a bit of a tradition on this channel, which is my one-sentence reviews. I do these every 6 months, and I go through all the books I read in those 6 months, and I review every single one with a single sentence. Now, sometimes the sentence is a little long, okay? Sometimes it runs on a little bit. There are occasionally commas and semicolons, an ellipses or two, but they can all loosely be defined as a single sentence. And this is just a great way for me to give you my thoughts on every book I have read. In this case, I have read over 60 books in the first 6 months of 2024, so there's a lot to get through, and this format allows me to review lots of books in a shorter amount of time and practice being a little more succinct because it does not come naturally to me. So strap in, and I'm going to start with January and work all the way through to June, sharing my one-sentence reviews and my ratings for every book I have read so far this year. Starting with Monstrous Volume 7 Devourer by Marjorie M. Liu. Meika continues to be my sapphic badass hero, and Kippa continues to melt my heart. 5 stars. The Valley of Horses by Jean M. Auel. Our resilient main character learns to survive on her own in a meditation on grief, loss, and our deeply human need for belonging. 5 stars. Akata Witch by Nnedi Okorafor. Prepubescent characters are tasked with defeating a magical serial killer of children, but first, they must play soccer. 2 stars. The Mammoth Hunters by Jean M. Auel. Ayla and Jondalar refuse to communicate for an entire winter full of ill-fated love triangles, distracting from the best part of this book, which is Ride Egg. 4 stars. Enter Ghost by Isabella Hamad. A thoughtful and moving novel which examines the many layers of Palestinian identity, masterfully mirroring the themes and theatrical elements of Hamlet on a backdrop of Palestine and Israel. 5 stars. Mislaid in Parts Half Known by Seanan McGuire. A hodgepodge transition novella that could have been a couple chapters at the end of the last installment. 2 stars. Moon of the Turning Leaves by Wabgeshig Rice. A love letter to the Anishinaabe people and the Ontarian landscape set in an apocalyptic near future. 4 stars. The Companion by E. E. Ottoman. Unfortunately, this lacked the coziness, cuteness, and romantic build-up I had been hoping for, but it was really nice to read about trans characters in a poly relationship in a historical setting. 3 stars. Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. An interesting read with some unique elements and well-executed aspects that didn't quite fully meet my expectations. Honestly, I'm starting to wonder if R.F. Kuang just isn't my cup of tea. 3 stars. Wayward by Amelia Hart. Despite enjoying the characters, setting, and atmosphere here, I just could not get on board with the central message that a woman's strength comes from her womb. I've read other books that do what this book was trying to do better and more inclusively. 3 stars. Happy Place by Emily Henry. Harriet might be the most boring MC of all time, and all of the characters were just the same thinly veiled vessel for weird niche references and sarcastic quips, just in different fonts. 1 star. The Reading List by Sarah Nisha Adams. A lovely and wholesome book about how reading and books can bring people together, how literature can be a guiding light through difficult times, especially through grief. 5 stars. Getting into February, we start with The Plains of Passage by Jean M. Auel. This is where the series really starts to go off the rails. 3 stars. In the Lives of Puppets by T.J. Klune, a middle-of-the-road read that felt a little bit disjointed in terms of its intended audience. 3 stars. Check and Mate by Ali Hazelwood. Certainly not a perfect book by any means, but definitely the best Ali Hazelwood I've ever read, which to be fair is a very low bar, but it's something, I suppose. 3 stars. The Woman in Me by Britney Spears. A poorly written, repetitive, and rambling account of Britney's life that didn't have nearly as much insight and self-reflection as I'd hoped for. 2 stars. Being Henry by Henry Winkler. A totally passable autobiography about an actor who seems like a pretty cool guy. 3 stars. The Housemaid by Frida McFadden. Terrible people being terrible in an extremely poorly written, yet somewhat entertaining popcorn thriller. 2 stars. The Housemaid's Secret by Frida McFadden. A book that was somehow even worse and even more ridiculous than its very poorly executed predecessor. 1 star. The Wager by David Gran. Historical fiction about a very interesting event in history that was so matter-of-fact and bland that I couldn't even muster up an ounce of concern. 3 stars. Mostly just for identifying all the words that have naval origins. which I found interesting because I'm a nerd. Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. A beautifully written story that highlights Ross's ability to create immersive worlds and intricate magic systems that had a little bit too abrupt of an ending for me. 4 stars. Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. A wild ride through a dark, twisted world that, for better or worse, keeps you hooked. 4 stars. Hellbent by Leigh Bardugo. A sequel that lost all the stakes of the original, that felt more like a leisurely stroll through the park with a little quaint side quest to hell rather than a heart-pounding adventure. Also, many mentions of a golden erect phallus. 3 stars. A Deadly Education by Naomi Novik. A slow and somewhat confusing start that developed into a heartwarming story of friendship and resilience, examining classism and privilege on the way. 4 stars. Getting into March, we start with The Last Graduate, also by Naomi Novik, an exciting sequel with some wholesome and funny moments that could have been so much more with a little more rawness and vulnerability and darkness. 4 stars. Poverty by America by Matthew Desmond. Despite my initial reservations, I found this to be a really well done exploration of poverty in the United States, exploring so many different systemic issues while also looking at individual experiences with compassion. 5 stars. The Golden Enclaves by Naomi Novik. While something was definitely lost in leaving that closed room environment of the Scholomance, we did gain some new insight and a deeper exploration of the themes of this entire series in this 3rd installment, with an unflinching look at the evils people are willing to commit to maintain the status quo. 4 stars. We by Yevgeny Zamyatin. An inventive imagining of a dystopian future where happiness and freedom are in opposition. This was a reread and I still enjoyed it. 3 stars. Our Share of Night by Mariana Enriquez. A deeply disturbing yet intriguing weaving together of so many fascinating themes, from classism and exploitation of the poor to the AIDS crisis in South America to generational trauma and complex family relationships. This was such an interesting novel that went to so many dark, strange places. 4 stars. She is a Haunting by Trang Tan Tran. This book uses the horror classic trope of a haunted house as a metaphor for colonialism, a parasite worming its way in, uninvited, taking the reins and raining destruction. 4 stars. Moving into April, we have The Angel's Game by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. With the perfect balance of humor and suspense, Zafón immerses us once again into 1940s Barcelona with all of the atmospheric, noir-inspired, dark vibes you could possibly hope for, with evocative, descriptive language, sparkling wit, and a fascinating mystery. 5 stars. Unbury Carol by Josh Mallerman. A campy, silly ode to spaghetti westerns with oodles of self-referential, self-aware, tongue-in-cheek humor, a little bit of body horror, some melodrama, and an oppressive atmosphere that all added up to a really fun read. 4 stars. Ocean's Echo by Everina Maxwell. From its engaging characters to its immersive plot and wonderful inclusive representation of queer characters, Ocean's Echo blew me away and had me giggling and kicking my feet. 5 stars. A Day of Fallen Night by Samantha Shannon. Exploring themes like enduring love, inner strength, women's place in society, grief and loss, bodily autonomy, and so much more. A Day of Fallen Night somehow managed to exceed my sky-high expectations, and I would highly recommend it to any fantasy fan. 5 stars. Parable of the Talents by Octavia E. Butler. Despite the discomfort this duology evokes, it is so deeply relevant to our current time, the issues we are facing right now, despite having been written in the 90s. This series is as thought-provoking as it is absolutely heartbreaking. 5 stars. Little Eve by Catriona Ward. Vivid characters, an eerie gothic atmosphere, and gorgeous descriptions of this misty Scottish island with the brackish waves and the rocky shore, and the mysteries of this strange group of people and their even stranger beliefs. 5 stars. Wool by Hugh Howey. Impeccable character development, compelling relationships, a mysterious and intriguing world with so many secrets to uncover, gorgeously written scenes that left me speechless. This was a fantastic introduction to a brand new sci-fi world. 5 stars. Shift by Hugh Howey. This was worth the read to learn more of the silo's mysteries, but not nearly as well executed as the first book in the series. 3 stars. Dust by Hugh Howey. While there were certainly little gems here and there, I'm pretty disappointed with this as a conclusion for this series, especially in the deterioration of the character development and some of the ridiculous elements that were introduced. 3 stars. Let Us Descend by Jesmyn Ward. A stunningly written, dreamlike exploration of the realities of slavery through the eyes of a young, grief-stricken girl who is set on a journey through ever-worsening circles of hell, reminiscent of oral tradition and legend, drawing inspiration from Dante's Inferno. 5 stars. Getting into May with Cinder Witch by Sherry Priest. This book managed to deliver an eerie atmosphere while keeping things light and humorous, but unfortunately it had a premise that was creepier than the reality. 3 stars. What We Don't Talk About When We Talk About Fat by Aubrey Gordon. This book had some great moments, but was not quite as comprehensive as I'd hoped. 3 stars. Galatea by Madeline Miller. I love how blunt and scathing Miller is here, going for the jugular, portraying the righteous anger of a woman who has been abused and controlled and objectified. This is beautifully written and heartbreaking and oppressive and fantastic. 5 stars. I'm a Fan by Sheena Patel. If this were a collection of essays on the various themes, I would have loved it, but every single fictional aspect of this story drove me absolutely mad and pissed me off. 2 stars. The Paradox Hotel by Rob Hart. A fun, diverse sci-fi romp with an emotional core of gold that had just a little bit too much going on to be neatly wrapped up and was confusing at times. 3 stars. Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. One-of-a-kind speculative fiction with a fascinating world, vivid characters, compelling relationship dynamics, and a bit of a closed-room mystery, all tied up with a lot of tongue-in-cheek humor. 5 stars. Monstrous Volume 8, Inferno by Marjorie Liu. A gloriously queer speculative fiction graphic novel with found family dynamics and a steampunk aesthetic. 5 stars. Role-Playing by Kathy Yardley. This book was so ridiculously cute and charming. I need more romances with middle-aged love interests ASAP, yesterday, last year. I'm obsessed with this book. It is nerdy and sweet and adorable and lovely. Go read it right now. 5 stars. Getting into our final month for this video, June, starting with That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon by Kimberly Lemming. A hilariously self-aware, steamy romp that uses every possible romance trope all in one that is both fun and entertaining, but also a little bit underdeveloped for my taste. 3 stars. A River Enchanted by Rebecca Ross, a beautifully written fantasy story taking place on an island inspired by Scotland that has amazing atmosphere and some really interesting characters, but focused on the wrong characters to make this as compelling and mature and enduring a story as it could have been. 4 stars. One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. The captain of the Destriers and his gray eyes had more page time than the atmosphere, the plot, the magic system, and the themes combined. Such a poorly written disappointment. 2 stars. An Ember in the Ashes by Sabaa Tahir. A stellar example of YA fantasy with compelling characters, interesting thematic content, and really intricate, developed world building and magic systems that made for a really fantastic read. 5 stars. Harrow the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. This book had one of the most confusing first 30% of any book I've ever read, but it was so worth the headaches and the confusion and the rereads because it was just as fantastic as the first book in its own unique, beautiful way, and I highly recommend this series. 5 stars. Where Darkness Blooms by Andrea Hanna. I was so excited to read about a town surrounded by bloodthirsty sunflowers, but this turned out to be confusing, full of plot holes, and mostly just an exercise in me realizing that I'm old enough to be mostly focused on being disappointed in the parenting of these characters' mothers, rather than the questionable decisions of these teenage protagonists themselves. 2 stars. Meeting Millie by Claire Ashton. This could have been such an adorable romance, but it was so weighed down by constant biphobia, slut-shaming, manipulation, and just weird, mean behavior between the two love interests. 2 stars. Camp Damascus by Chuck Tingle. An interesting premise with engaging themes that was lacking a little bit in the execution and the character development, which is something I've noticed with some of Tingle's other works. I still enjoyed it, but it could have been more. 3 stars. The Queen of 14th Street by Barry Krennic, a radio play exploring queer theater history of the 1930s with so much heart. I absolutely loved this. 5 stars. In Tongues by Thomas Grattan, a beautiful, raw, real, melancholic, queer coming-of-age story that was an absolute tour de force. 5 stars. You Exist Too Much by Zaina Arafat. I honestly wish I could go back and unread this. It was draining, depressing, hollow, and just terrible representation for bisexual people and also for eating disorders. 1 star. Mistakes Were Made by Meryl Wilsner, a sometimes steamy, sometimes sweet, sapphic age gap romance that was made really creepy by the way the author handled the age gap. 3 stars. And last but not least, The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas, which I read in French, a revenge tale of epic proportions with compelling characters, disguises, and twists galore that could have gone deeper into the titular character's psyche while saving some of the side quest stories for a short story collection. 4 stars. Whew. I feel like I'm losing my voice. Those were all the books I read from January to June, the first 6 months of 2024, all reviewed in a single sentence. Although some of the sentences were a bit long, I know, I acknowledge it. Don't yell at me in the comments. Let me know if you've read any of these books in the comments down below and what your thoughts were. Did you agree with me? Did you have a completely different take? I would love to hear it. Just be respectful. As always, I will be back here in another 6 months to do this for the books I read in the second half of this year. And hopefully you enjoyed it. As always, give this video a like if you did. Feel free to join us on Patreon if you want to join our monthly book club or our quarterly buddy read, or just in general to join a Discord full of book lovers. It's such an awesome, supportive, intellectually stimulating place. It's one of my favorite places on the internet. So feel free to join us if you like. The link is in the description box. Thank you to my patrons for your support, as always. If you want more extensive thoughts on any of these books, check out my Goodreads link down below, or my Reading Vlogs playlist, because many of these books were read in reading vlogs where you can hear my thoughts extensively expressed, both with and without spoilers. It's all there for you. And with that, I'm gonna get going. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you really soon in my next one. Bye, friends.